Some relationships don't end with time. They fade into such a deep silence that when they appear again, you can no longer tell whether the pain came before them or because of them. My name is William. This is my story. It was high school. That phase of life where love is felt before it's understood, and control is mistaken for care. Back then, I believed I loved her. But when I look back now, it feels like I was mostly afraid that she might move ahead of me, grow beyond me. She wanted to hold life with open hands. Her eyes were full of dreams, and one thing was common in all of them: freedom. And maybe that's where the problem began, because I always saw freedom as a threat. Anything that could take her further away from me felt like an enemy. Modeling wasn't just a hobby for her, it was becoming her identity. Standing in front of the camera wasn't just about poses, it was about feeling her worth. But in my eyes, the people standing behind the camera were far more visible, especially that one man who was quite well known in our city, the photographer. His name carried weight, but his presence felt even heavier. When she first told me she'd be shooting with him, I smiled, or at least I tried to. Beneath that smile stood an entire army of questions. I argued. Then I got tired and went quiet. Without writing anything down, without saying it out loud, we made an unspoken deal. She would continue modeling, and I would label my insecurity as trust and learn to tolerate it. Some secrets don't make noise. They slip quietly into your life. The first time I picked up her phone, I didn't even have to search. The words were right there. Words that aren't used in just friendship. Words people use when boundaries have already started to blur. I asked her about it. She answered without hesitation, with so much confidence that I felt ashamed of my own thoughts. I convinced myself that maybe I was overthinking. I stayed silent, and sometimes silence is the biggest mistake of all. Time passed, messages increased, not in number but in weight. The words I barely received had become someone else's daily routine, and still I stayed, maybe because leaving was hard, or maybe because facing the truth was even harder. Then came that evening, one that felt completely ordinary. Talk of a date, food, and then an unexpected request. She said she wanted to check my phone. I agreed immediately. I trusted myself. But when I asked for the same in return, the brief change on her face, I still remember it. She checked my phone, found nothing. Then I picked up hers. And in that moment, I understood that some things don't need proof. Conversations between two women, accusations, anger, and one common reason. That man, that house, that loneliness. I didn't create a scene. I didn't ask questions. I simply stood up and walked away. Some relationships end because there's nothing left to talk about. A few weeks later, the world saw what I had already seen. Their relationship was no longer hidden. It was official. And me, I moved on quietly. At least that's what I believed. Years passed, people change, or maybe they just learn better acting. I started understanding life again, learned to give myself time. And then one day I heard her name again. Her relationship had ended, and there was someone who believed I was the unfinished chapter of her story. When we met again, no old promises surfaced, just a strange closeness. As if some things had never really left. We kept meeting. Nights passed, but something inside me remained locked. I didn't want to open the door I had once escaped with great difficulty. She talked about the future. I wanted to live in the present. Her questions increased every day and my answers grew slower. I could have told the truth, but I chose silence. Maybe because truth requires courage, and at that time I only wanted peace. But peace is sometimes the most expensive lie. And when she asked that same question once again, I realized that whatever I said next wouldn't just be an answer. It would choose a path, one with no way back. I had no idea back then that what I was about to say wouldn't just break her heart. It would lay the foundation for a completely new ending to an old story. The next day when we met, everything seemed normal, but in reality, nothing was. Her smile was the same as before, yet behind it was a hidden restlessness. And my silence was also the same as before, but this time it wasn't just quietness, it was a carefully chosen distance. We were sitting across from each other with coffee cups between us, but the conversation wasn't about coffee at all. She kept looking at me as if an answer might slip out from my face, and I kept looking at her as if I were searching for a new way to escape her questions. Every now and then she wanted to say something, then stopped, as if the words reached her lips and got scared. It wasn't the first time we had sat like this in front of each other, but it was the first time I had already decided inside that I didn't want to be part of this story anymore. Still, I was there. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because some unfinished chapters don't close on their own. After that day, we started meeting more often. Sometimes at her insistence, sometimes because of my own weakness. After every meeting, an emptiness remained, as if I wasn't taking anything with me, only leaving something behind. At night, she would talk about her loneliness, her broken hopes. I listened. I just listened. I gave few answers because every answer gave birth to a new question. She believed I was her support, and perhaps I was feeding that misunderstanding. I was with her, but not completely. My body was present, but my mind was far away. Every time she mentioned the future, something inside me shut down. I changed the topic. She sensed it, but couldn't fully understand it. Her questions slowly began to change. First she asked, "What are we?" Then, "What do you want?" And then the direct question, "Can we be in a relationship again?" Every question was a test for me, and in every test I was only buying time. Sometimes I felt pity for her, sometimes anger toward myself. I knew I wasn't being fair to her, but I also knew I didn't want to sacrifice myself again. I was afraid of reopening a wound that I had forgotten with great difficulty. At night, when I was alone, old images returned to my mind, her lies, her smile, and my silence. I asked myself whether I had truly forgiven her, or whether I just wanted to prove that I was strong. Some answers are only given by time, and even time answers only when it wants to. One day she asked me directly, "Why do you stay so distant when we are so close?" I stayed silent for a few moments, then I spoke a half-truth. I said I wasn't ready yet. She had heard those words before, but this time she held on to them. There was hope in her eyes and fear too. And I knew I was playing with both. After that, her questions became a daily routine. Every meeting ended the same way, a moment of silence, then the same question. And each time my answer became more lifeless. I could feel that this pattern would eventually break, but I had no idea how. Sometimes I felt that maybe she had changed. Maybe time had taught her something too. But then I saw the same urgency in her words, the same restlessness. Things she never stopped to reflect on, she only wanted to possess them. And me, I had stopped. That day when we went out for a drive, the air was quiet. We spoke very little. Suddenly she held my hand and said she didn't want to lose me. If she had said that at another time, it might have touched my heart. But in that moment, I felt only one thing: wait. That night, I decided that this couldn't continue for long. But deciding and doing are two very different things. I could have told the truth, but telling the truth meant breaking her again. And I kept quiet, telling myself that I was trying to protect her. In reality, I was protecting myself. And then came the day when she asked the same question again, this time more directly, more forcefully, as if she was no longer willing to wait. There were tears in her eyes and complaint in her voice. In that moment, I realized that whatever I said next wouldn't just be an answer. It would be a strike. What I didn't know was whether the words I was about to choose would merely hide the truth, or deliberately bring a buried wound back to life. After that night, things didn't slow down, they sped up. Like a car sliding downhill without brakes, still trying to stay straight. We kept meeting, but every meeting carried an unfamiliar tension. A tension that never turned into words, it just hung in the air. She started to seem more attached than before. Every message, every call, every meeting carried an urgency, as if time was slipping out of her hands and I was the last thing she was trying to hold on to. And me, I was slowly getting tired, not physically but mentally. Sometimes when she was close to me, I would look at her and think, this is the same girl for whom I once forgot all my limits. And then the very next moment I'd remember, this is the same girl whose lies hollowed me out from the inside. Both thoughts lived inside me at the same time, and maybe that's where my biggest weakness was born. She thought I understood her. I listened to her words, watched her tears, and stayed quiet. She tried to understand that silence, but every time she took it the wrong way. She thought my silence was depth. She didn't know that sometimes silence is just self-defense. She often talked about her past relationship. told me how she was betrayed, how she was left alone. I listened, and it always felt strange that one part of the story was missing, as if some truth still hadn't reached her lips, or maybe that truth was too heavy even for her. I remember one night when she looked at me and said, "You know what you are to me, right?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because whatever the answer was, it would be wrong. She wanted an answer from herself, and I didn't want to carry the weight of that answer. Her questions were no longer just questions. They had turned into ultimatums. At the end of every meeting, the same thing: is this all we are, or is there something ahead? And every time I asked for time, as if time were something that never runs out. I knew I was giving her false hope. I knew this cycle was only bringing her more pain, and yet I stayed, maybe because somewhere inside me, a small part wanted control over this story, the control I never had before. She thought I had changed, and maybe I had, but she didn't know that some changes are built on top of wounds. I wasn't loving her, I was protecting my boundaries, but boundaries were invisible to her. One day she told me directly that she couldn't wait anymore. There was no anger in her voice, no shouting, just exhaustion. And exhaustion is often more dangerous than anger. She said either I was with her or I was. In that moment, I felt like this was the time to tell the truth, to say I wasn't ready, that I didn't want to go back. But then I remembered her face, broken yet full of hope, and I stayed silent again. By staying silent, I didn't make a decision, but the decision was still being made. After that night, her behavior changed even more. More claims, more questions, more complaints, more hope. And slowly, I began to feel that this situation wasn't just poisonous for her anymore, it was becoming poisonous for me too. I stayed awake at night, thinking that if I had clearly refused her earlier, maybe it wouldn't have come this far. But then old memories would surface, that phone, those messages, that house. And then a hard voice inside me would say, "Why are you turning yourself into a victim again?" And then the day came that was different from all the others. She asked me to meet her. This time there was no question in her voice, just a strange firmness. We sat facing each other, and for the first time she didn't talk around the issue. She said it straight, she wouldn't wait anymore. She wanted the truth now, at this very moment. I looked into her eyes, and I realized that I was still making the same mistake I had made years ago, hiding the truth behind my fear. In that moment, I knew there were only two paths left. Either I tell the truth, or I say something that ends everything forever. And I chose a third path, without thinking about what it would lead to. I just didn't know that the words I was about to say wouldn't only push her away from me, they would also keep me from ever meeting myself again. The day we sat face to face, even the air seemed to pause. The weight of starting the conversation rested on both of us, but the responsibility felt entirely mine. She was looking at me with a gaze that carried certainty, as if she believed that today she would finally get her answers. And maybe she was right, she just didn't know the price those answers would come with. Without circling around it, she said she was tired of waiting, of confusion, of my half-spoken truths. She said it felt like even when I was with her, I was somewhere else. And this time I didn't try to escape with a lie. I stayed silent, and my silence only fed the fear growing inside her. She kept talking about her loneliness, her mistakes, her hopes. She admitted she may have done many things wrong in the past, but now she wanted just one chance, just one promise. As I listened, I felt every word knocking down an old wall inside me. I remembered her crying, and I also remembered what I had once seen on her phone. Those two images collided in my mind, and I was standing between them without any shield. She asked me if I had ever truly forgiven her. The question was direct, and the answer should have been too, but I knew she wasn't ready to handle this version of the truth, and maybe neither was I. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just running from her, I was running from myself. I was afraid to admit that I had turned my pain into my identity, and as long as that pain stayed alive, I couldn't truly be okay with anyone else. She moved closer to me, close enough that if I reached out my hand, everything could fall apart again. She said she believed we had both learned with time, that maybe this time we could be better. Those words broke something inside me, because I knew I could never give her the version of myself she was hoping for. I told her I wasn't ready, Again, but this time she didn't forgive it. She said that answer was no longer acceptable. Either tell the truth or leave, and this time leaving would also be an answer. There was no threat in her words, just exhaustion and certainty, as if she already knew that whatever she was about to hear wouldn't be good, and yet she still wanted to hear it. I thought that if I stood up and walked away, maybe everything would end quietly, but I knew that silence would break her even more, and maybe break me too, so I stayed. And by staying, I chose the path that seemed easiest, but was actually the most dangerous. I slowly began shifting the conversation, bringing up old memories, hinting at old wounds, things we both knew but had never spoken about openly. Her face changed, first surprise, then anxiety. She could feel the conversation moving in a direction she hadn't prepared for. She tried to stop me, told me to leave the past behind, told me to talk about the present, but I couldn't stop. Maybe because I didn't fully understand what I was doing, or maybe because I wanted her to feel the same weight I had been carrying for years. I felt control over my words, as if I were playing someone else's role, a role that could say anything because it feared nothing. In that role, there was no difference between truth and lies. Tears filled her eyes, but she still hadn't stopped hopping. She still believed I would stop at the last moment, that I would say it was all said in anger, that I would reach out and pull her back. But I didn't stop. At that moment, I knew that if I stepped back now, I would fall into the same circle I had escaped with great difficulty. So I let my words become harsher, so harsh that taking them back would be impossible. And in that moment, I realized that what was about to happen wouldn't just be a breakup. It would be something that would change both of us forever. I thought I was ending a story. I had no idea I was opening the doors to an ending from which there is no return. She may have let go of the hope that things could be fixed, but she was still holding on to the hope that they could at least make sense. She looked at me as if the final truth was written somewhere in my eyes, just waiting to be read. And I was holding that truth back from turning into words, because I knew that once it came out, nothing would ever be the same again. She went silent, the kind of silence that carries more weight than a scream. Tears began to fall from her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away right away. Maybe because she wanted me to see them. Maybe because she needed to convince herself that this was really happening. In a very soft voice, she said that she had hidden the truth from me, but that she had never intentionally wanted to break me. She said she had been lost back then, that she had trusted the wrong people. She kept saying that she had already paid for her mistakes for a long time. I was listening to her, but inside my head, only one thought kept circling. Every person is the hero of their own story. She said that when she came back into my life, she thought this might be a second chance, that maybe I was the person who could pull her out of her past. And as she said that, I realized that without meaning to, I had become a source of support for her, without ever considering how weak I myself still was. She asked me if I loved her. The question hit straight at the heart. I had never really thought about the answer, because I knew that whatever it was, it would hurt someone. Whether there was love or not was a secondary question. The real question was whether I was ready to tell the truth. I told her that love isn't just a feeling, it's a responsibility, and I wasn't ready for that responsibility. It was a half-truth, but sometimes a half-truth hurts more than a complete lie. She said I was keeping her hanging, that I knew exactly what I was doing, that I gave her hope and then stepped back again, and I didn't deny it, because denying it would have meant that I still wanted room to escape. She stood up and began to pace the room, as if trying to hold herself together. She said she couldn't make herself small anymore, that if I wanted to leave her I should just say it outright. This time she wasn't speaking through tears. This time there was a strange firmness in her voice. And right there I felt something shift inside me, as if I wasn't just defending myself anymore, but preparing to attack. I remembered how I used to see myself as blameless and take every fault upon my own shoulders. And suddenly it occurred to me that maybe in this story, no one was completely innocent. I told her that if she wanted the truth, it wouldn't be easy for her to hear. She said without hesitation that she was ready. Maybe that was her biggest mistake. I began laying out the past in front of her, not like complaints but like accounts being settled. My words were cold, but my intent was clear. Her face slowly drained of color. She understood that this wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was something else. She said I wanted to punish her. I didn't deny it. I only said that every decision has consequences, and some consequences take time to arrive. After that, there was more than pain in her eyes. There was fear. Fear that maybe she didn't truly know me, and maybe I didn't truly know myself either. She asked if I had ever forgiven her. The question silenced me for a few seconds, because the answer was both yes and no, and that was where the line blurred even further, the line I had been avoiding crossing. I told her that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and sometimes forgetting is impossible. Hearing that, she closed her eyes, as if making a decision somewhere deep inside herself. She said that if all of this was just the weight of the past, then I could leave her right now, that she wouldn't force me, that I just needed to tell the truth once, and then she would walk away. And that moment was the most dangerous turning point of my story. Because I knew that if I told the truth right then, I would break her, but I would still remain human. But if I said what had been hidden in some corner of my mind for years, then I would become something else entirely. And I decided which path I was going to take. That night, I thought I was only using words. I had no idea that I was actually about to carve my name into someone else's wounds. The moment when everything has to be said is never the moment where voices are raised. It's the moment where a person becomes completely straight, so straight that even a lie starts to sound like truth. I was sitting in front of her, and I knew that whatever came out now could never be taken back. She had said she was ready for the truth. People rarely know what they're actually ready for. I looked at her first, for a long time, as if I was memorizing a face that would soon exist only in memory. There was fear in her eyes, but beneath that fear, hope was still alive. And maybe that hope became my greatest weapon. I said softly that I never wanted to come back into this relationship. Those words weren't new to her, but this time there was no softness in them. She asked why I was there then. The question was direct, so was the answer. I told her I stayed because I wanted to see something. She asked, confused, "See what?" I said, "To see whether you had really changed, or whether you were just lonely." Something flashed in her eyes, maybe anger, maybe shame. She said this was cruelty, that I was rubbing salt into her wounds. I didn't deny it, because denial wasn't needed anymore. Then I said the thing I had buried inside myself for years. I told her that when she came back into my life, I already knew I couldn't love her. But I also knew exactly what state she was in. Broken, confused, trying to rediscover her worth. She asked, "So you used me?" I said, "No, using someone means you gain something." I didn't gain anything except satisfaction. Her face hardened completely. She asked what kind of satisfaction. And then I said the sentence I never consciously planned, but that had somehow always been waiting. I said, "The satisfaction that you felt the pain of waiting too. That you tasted the same confusion you once gave me. That you believed you belonged to someone, and then realized you never really did." She couldn't stay standing. She sat down as if her legs had given up. Tears fell from her eyes, but this time there was no sound. Some pain doesn't need a voice. She said I was a terrible person. And maybe she wasn't wrong. I told her this wasn't done out of anger. Anger had ended long ago. This was done with a cold mind, slowly, step by step. Every meeting, every lie, every "I'm not ready yet." All of it had one purpose. She screamed that this wasn't closure, it was cruelty. That I had dragged her back to the place she had barely escaped from. I said maybe. But I also said that I had only made her feel what I once felt. Without screaming, without explanations. She asked if I had ever forgiven her. That question still stays with me. I said, there was forgiveness, but there was no forgetting. And where there is no forgetting, something always remains. She said if I was going to leave her anyway, I should have just said it directly. Why all this drama? Why this plan? And that's when I gave her my final truth. I told her that walking away cleanly would never have given me peace. Because I had already been broken cleanly once. I just wanted to see. When the roles are reversed, does the story still feel so simple? She said I would never be happy. I didn't answer, because maybe she was right. I stood up, left her tears, her silence, her broken certainty behind. I didn't tell her I hated her. Because if I had hated her, I wouldn't have put in so much effort. I just walked away. After that, she blocked me everywhere. Mutual people stopped asking questions. And life went back to normal. At least on the surface. But at night, when everything is quiet, one question returns. Was this really a victory? Or just another wound I now carry with me? I had taken my revenge. But the emptiness that comes after revenge. There is no revenge for that. Some stories don't end because justice is served. They end because both characters grow tired. And when exhaustion arrives, the difference between winning and losing slowly disappears.